Welcome to this presentation about cognitive development theory and the zone of proximal development. Let's get started. Meet Tebo. Tebo facilitates an online course about teaching methodology. In one assignment, he expects his students to compile a lesson plan on the subject they teach. When receiving the lesson plans, he is utterly disappointed. Tepper obviously assumed all of his students are familiar with the components and layout of a lesson plan and did not make any attempt to assist. He has no clue of the problems students experienced or how to guide students through their problems. Let's see if we can help Tepper use some concepts of the cognitive development theory by Lev Vygotsky. Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who lived almost 100 years ago. He developed the cognitive development theory that stresses the fundamental role of social interaction in the development of cognition. From this theory, he formulated two groundbreaking concepts, namely the zone of proximal development and scaffolding. We are going to have a closer look at both of them now. Let us start with the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky explained the zone of proximal development as three concentric circles that represent things you can currently do, things you can do with assistance from an expert or fellow learner, and things beyond your current capability. The area between the I can do this and this is beyond my current capabilities is viewed as the zone of proximal development where the most sensitive instruction or guidance should occur. This is where Tepper and us need to focus our attention. Vygotsky believed that by providing the appropriate assistance when a student is in the zone of proximal development will give the student enough of a boost to achieve the learning outcome. To assist a person to reach their zone of proximal development, online facilitators should focus on three important components which aid the learning process. Be knowledgeable about your field. Stay abreast with the latest developments, articles, technologies, and inventions. Stimulate social interactions between learners. The idea is that after completing a task jointly, the learner will likely be able to complete the same task individually next time. Apply the principles of scaffolding, which will now be explained. Let's use the example of building a house. The scaffold is an external structure that provides support for the workers until the house itself is strong enough to support them while they are building it. As the home gains stability, the scaffold becomes less necessary and is gradually removed. Without reliable scaffolding, construction workers would be vulnerable to a number of safety hazards on site. In a similar way, students without scaffolding will have a difficult time mastering outcomes and new knowledge. Successful scaffolding helps students gain new knowledge to accomplish outcomes that might otherwise be outside of their abilities. How does scaffolding help students reach their zone of proximal development? When done properly, scaffolding increases the size of the I can do this with help circle to reach its full potential. Scaffolding is nothing else than an instructional strategy used by facilitators to help students learn complex ideas that they could not have learned based solely on their own cognitive capabilities. Students without scaffolding will have a difficult time with the cognitive processing of content and will most definitely fail to master the outcomes. Ultimately, the aim of scaffolding is to allow the students to move from the inability to perform a task to being able to do so through guidance, interaction, and questions. So how could Tepper use scaffolding to guide his learners to reach their zone of proximal development? Well, he has a few choices. Let us have a look at them. For starters, Tepper can assess his students' current or baseline knowledge and experience about lesson plans. A good way of doing this is to hand out a short online survey or discussion forum where he can ask simple questions such as, have you ever used a lesson plan? Give a short definition of a lesson plan. Establishing students' baseline knowledge of a topic will help Tepo relate new content to what students already understand or can do. Tepo suddenly realizes that he merely dumped his study guide on Blackboard, possibly overloading the students with information. The right thing for Tepo to do is to gradually introduce information to his students and break down content into smaller units, making it more digestible to students. We also call it chunking, and by doing this, he can effectively discuss each topic in depth while allowing students to fully absorb the information before moving on to the next topic. Tepo can also use fading as a scaffolding method. He can provide clues, for example, on the components of a lesson plan. He can use various ways to do this, such as posting tips on the announcement section in Blackboard. As the student becomes more capable of solving the problem without support, the facilitator gradually removes these clues. An extremely successful way of scaffolding Tepo can also use is to model the kind of outcome he wants to see. He can give an example of a good lesson plan and a poor one. Important here is to explain and point out what criteria were either met or missed. Tepo can also create opportunities for peer-to-peer learning and collaboration by using discussion boards. The aim is to get students talking and working together. The idea is that after completing a task jointly, the learner will likely be able to complete the same task individually next time. Tepo can ask a question to kick off the discussion and then stand back to let the discussion unfold in order to foster lively debate amongst learners, as long as they stick to the topic, of course. The secret is to talk less and listen more, while closely keeping an eye on what is said on the discussion board. Should they dwell off the topic, one should intervene to get them back on track. This might sound very basic, but to ensure availability is another form of scaffolding. Students should feel free to email or call you should they struggle with a certain area. They should, however, do so in an indicated time slot, given they respect your privacy and time. Can you think of more scaffolding methods which Tepo can use? What are they?